Hey, and welcome back to week 13 of our Life of Jesus study. This is going to be really exciting, I think, and I hope that you guys are starting to feel that we're closer and closer to the big event, the main event that we are all going to talk about clearly, which is the death, burial, and resurrection. Sorry, my mic was not very close to me. So if you couldn't hear that, I apologize. That's always helpful to have the mic actually in front of me. If you didn't hear that, welcome back to week 13. I love having you guys here. I'm super excited that we're getting back towards the resurrection. When we start in the Gospels, I think you'll probably notice this already. Um, it's really exciting because it's the incarnation. We're talking about Jesus taking on flesh and dwelling among us. That's an enormous truth. And you almost fly through. I mean, you only get really one account from Jesus' childhood, and then you're immediately into the ministry, and you read for what seems like a long time in the ministry of Jesus, and then but most of the gospel is focused on and pointing to the resurrection, the death, the burial, and the resurrection accounts, and then the ascension and the kickstart of the church. Remember when we started this discussion on the gospels, they're written in the church age. They're written post all of this happening. They're not writing as it's happening. They're writing looking back on the events of what has gone on in their lives. And so what a cool opportunity we have to read back through these. And I hope this has been helpful to you guys. So this week we're going through the life of Jesus, and we're going through specifically Lazarus. And this story, this account is fantastic. This is an amazing account for us, and I hope that you guys enjoyed reading this as much as I did. This week, as we're talking, we're going to pull up the Nicene Creed again. That's what we've been talking about every week. I hope that this is becoming more and more normal to you guys. And we're on that second half yet again here, and was made human. Now, we're going to see some things about Jesus' humanity here in the story that I think are incredibly important, and probably key to our understanding of Christ. And we're going to see that he was made human. He weeps. Shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. We're going to read that today. We're also going to see a kind of a semblance, a little taste of what the resurrection will look like. And so we're going to see the third day he rose again according to the scriptures. And so this all becomes very, very important for us as we come through into kind of the last several weeks of this study. For a little bit of context for you guys, this week you have read pages 117 through 136 in your CSB Harmonies. Remember, if this is your first week, we'd love to have you guys. Please make sure you pick one of these up. This thing is super duper helpful. Gospel Harmonies, Harmony of the Gospels by the Christian Standard Bible publisher. This is super nice to have. I had never had a CSB before, but I've really enjoyed it. So make sure to pick one of those up. Also, all of our verses will have the page numbers, and that hopefully will be super helpful to you guys. So make sure you grab one of those. In the context this week, this is one of our heavier reading weeks. This was, if I remember right, it's like 19 pages, I think. Yeah, 19 pages. And so you've spent 19 pages worth of the gospel. In the next 2 weeks, you're going to be reading 20. And then, so that's going to be about where you're going to be reading for the next several days, or for the next several weeks. So hopefully you guys can get on top of your reading, stay on top of your reading, and keep reading along, because I want you guys to not miss all the events that we're talking about here in the text. Obviously, we're not going to talk about every single one of them. So make sure you're reading through the Gospels. Jesus does a lot in these chapters. He's doing miracles. He's doing parables. There's large sections of teaching. And one thing to note as we come into the Lazarus account is the healing of the man that's born blind. If you go back in your books to page 117, I think this is a kind of a key passage for this one that we're going to read today. And I want to just point out to you guys a little bit of why. So this won't be on the screen, but I want you guys to pull open your books, go to page 117. This is the sixth sign, the healing of the man born blind. This is John 9, verses 1 through 41. So if you don't have one of these, look it up in your Bibles, and grab that passage. This is a lengthy passage, so we won't talk about the entire thing, but it is important because this would have been unheard of, to note here in the this healing is not something that they thought was possible. I'm going to throw my slide up bigger so you guys can see it. The healing is done to a man that was born blind, and this was an unheard of thing to happen. And what's notable about that account, for the Lazarus one today, is that the man was born blind for a purpose. Now, if you go back and you read John 9, verse 3, it says this: "Neither this man nor his parents sinned." Jesus answered, "This came about so that God's works might be displayed in him." Now, what a crazy, interesting thing to say, when you're talking about a man's blindness, right? This man was born blind, not because he sinned, not because his parents sinned, but because of the glory of God. And this theme is really evident in the next chapter as well, or in 2 chapters from this as well, in John chapter 11, where we talk about Lazarus. And so I want that to be really evident for you guys as we come into this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to read through the story of Lazarus. And I hope this will be helpful to all of you. So as we come into this text, we'll pray, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Dearly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you for showing us who you are through your word. Lord, thank you for the account of Lazarus. Thank you for what you're doing through it in our hearts, and help us to understand it so that we understand who you are, and how much you love us, and what your plan has always been. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So what we're going to do is we're going to read through this in sections today. John chapter 11 is 44 verses where we're talking about Lazarus, and then a little bit afterwards. So I want to make sure that we dig in here. So right off the bat, we're going to read verses 1 through 3, and then we'll kind of keep reading, and we'll stop every once in a while to talk about it. John 11, 1 through 3 says this: "Now a man was sick, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. And it was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So the sisters sent a message to him: 'Lord, the one you love is sick.'" Going on to verses 4 through 7, it says this: "When Jesus heard it, he said, 'This sickness will not end in death, but it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it.' Now Jesus loved Mary, loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after that, he said to the disciples, 'Let's go to Judea again.'" Now you'll have noticed that, as reading through this, this is marked off as the later Judean ministry into the later Perean ministry, which is the area across the river. So notice that the connections that Jesus has here with this family. Lazarus is his dear friend, the one that he loves, and there's a couple people that get talked about like this. The people that are especially close to Jesus, like Lazarus, and especially the apostle John, who's actually writing this account for us. And Mary is the one who will later anoint him with perfume. This is in the next chapter, John chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. And that's famously the one where Judas is mad that this has been broken because it was like a year's of wages and he was greedy. And Mary and Martha are also the sisters that are noted in Luke chapter 10, when they bicker a little bit over, Mary comes to be with Jesus, and Martha stays and works. And Martha gets mad and says to Jesus, "Hey, why isn't Mary helping me?" These are the same people. So there's a deep connection here, to Mary and Martha. And Lazarus, the brother, has fallen ill at this point. And he's fallen ill to the point where the sisters send a letter to Jesus. And why would he do that? Why would they do that? Well, because I think by now Jesus is able to heal. He can clearly heal this. He's healed many, many sick people. It would not be surprising for him to heal Lazarus. But what does Jesus do? And this is where I think we get surprised. He waits. But while he waits, he tells us why he waits. And this is the quote from that we just read. This sickness will not end in death, but is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. And then Jesus waits 2 more days before beginning the journey to go and see his friend Lazarus, who is at this point sick. Now, we know what happens. If you've done your reading this week, you know that Lazarus will die and that Lazarus will be resurrected. So, spoiler alert, that's what's going to happen here next. But I want to point something out to you guys that I think is really important. This is an incredibly hard time for Lazarus. That should seem obvious, but a lot of times we read right past that. This is a hard time for Lazarus and for his sisters. Though the text doesn't tell us what illness Lazarus was suffering from. If he is suffering unto death, he has an illness that's leading to death. It's going to be excruciatingly painful. He's not likely to be an older person. He's not remarked as having any other health conditions, and so if he is dying, he's dying of something hard. And yet, Jesus does not ease that suffering. He recognizes that he's sick, but he doesn't do anything until he's dead. Now, that starts us out with a really interesting and I think a hard question about suffering. And if you read through the New Testament, you're going to notice really fast that it does not promise that Christians will not suffer, but it does promise that there is a purpose, that there's a purpose for our suffering. Um, I think this is an interesting that later in the book of Romans, Paul, the apostle, lays out for us something that helps this make sense. In Romans chapter 8, verse 28, it says this, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. Now notice the first half of that verse. We know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. Now, this thing is going to work out together for Lazarus's good and for our good today. Now, how? That's the question I think we need to keep in mind, but we need to trust and have faith that that is the case here in this setup for this miracle. John 11, verse 8 through 11 goes on to say this, Rabbi, the disciples told him, just now the Jews tried to stone you, and you're going there again. Aren't there 12 hours in a day? Jesus answered, if anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble, but because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks during the night, he does stumble because the light is not in him. He said this, and then he told them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm on my way to wake him up. Then the disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will get well. Jesus, however, was speaking about his death, but they thought he was speaking about natural sleep. So Jesus then told them plainly, Lazarus has died. I'm glad for you that I wasn't there so that you may believe, but let's go to him. Then Thomas, called Twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go too, so that we may die with him. Now, obviously, the disciples know by this point that the Jews want to kill Jesus. Jesus had just said in the last chapter in John 10, verse 30, that I and the Father are one. Think about that statement. Jesus has been saying some really provocative things about his connection to the Father, and saying I and the Father are one. That's going to get him stoned, and they try to, and he escapes yet again because it's not his time yet. And they also think that Lazarus is just asleep, right? And they're like, well, if he's sleeping, then he'll recover. That's good. That's a good sign, right? If you're able to sleep and rest, that will help you to recover. You'll be less likely to pass away. But Jesus just cuts through all of that, and he says, you know what? I'm just going to tell them plainly, he is dead. Lazarus is dead, and his death is for a reason. He's going to tell the disciples he is dead so that you may believe. Quick side note, I wrote this in because I knew I would forget otherwise, and I think this is really cool. Thomas is usually known as Doubting Thomas, this guy. And it's because everybody always gives him a hard time for wanting to see the wounds in Jesus' hands and in his side. And of course, obviously, not the highlight of his faith. But here he is incredibly courageous. And I want to point that out to you guys. People have more than one layer, and the followers of Jesus are no different. And so I want you to see that. If you have struggled with doubts, so did Thomas, but Thomas also was willing to die for Jesus. And so just recognize that. I think the Christian life is full of those highs and lows. And I think that can be very helpful for us to see. John 11, 17 through 22, this is still on page 135 of your CSB, says this: When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, less than 2 miles away. You might want to note that for a later question. Many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. As soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Then Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Now you're going to please note this verse because Mary's going to say something similar without the addition. Yet even now, she goes on to say in verse 22, yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Your brother will rise again, Jesus told her. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she told him. I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into the world. Now, before I go on, because I'm going to read some pretty heavy things here in this section, please note this is amazing what Martha has just said. And so we're going to get back to that, but just I don't want you to forget Martha's confession of faith here is intense. She has just proclaimed that Jesus is the resurrection and the life, and responded correctly. And I just think that's amazing. She's the one that was being a busybody a couple chapters ago. So notice again, highs and lows. These people have good times and bad times, just like many of us. In a different note, and a little more grotesque note, and I'm going to throw this up so you guys can see it fully. There we go. Lazarus is dead. Now, I don't think that should be surprising to you guys, but Lazarus is dead. He's not a little dead. He's not a mostly dead. He has been dead for 4 days by the time that Jesus comes to visit. That's a major issue for this reason. When a person has been dead for 4 days, it begins what's known as putrefaction. Now, there's an article that I read. I will not link to it because it is very intense. But basically, what they did was it's through the Australian Museum. So if you really want to find it, go to the Australian Museum, and they have a work through of the stages of decomposition. So they actually show you the different stages in with pictures of a pig that's dead, and they left it exactly in the same spot. And in this study, it was exposed to the elements, so it was a little different than being put into a burial cave, but the decomposition process is very similar. So a person has been dead for 4 days. It begins what's known as putrefaction. So bacteria begins to digest the inside of the stomach, especially. That's kind of the first place where this really starts to happen, because that's where your digestive bacteria already is. But obviously, as your body is dead and stops functioning, that bacteria begins to digest and dissolve the intestines and the stomach lining, and it causes a gas buildup inside the body. And it causes fluid to be pushed out of the cells and the blood vessels and into the body cavity. It is not a pretty sight. Something to note here would have been that Lazarus would be bloated. He would be probably black and blue. It would be very clear that from the smell that something has gone horribly wrong. And of course it has. He has been dead now for 4 days. And that process would have continued until it began to dissolve the body, depending on the presence of insects and stuff like that, would have really determined how long this would have taken. So at this point, I say all those gross things to say, Lazarus is not, this is not oh, well, he was dead for like 2 minutes and he got CPR and he came back to life. He is like dead and decomposing at this point. And I need you to notice that because the biblical text makes it really obvious for us. For all normal means, Lazarus is long gone, right? And Martha seems to recognize this. But she still believes that Jesus could have saved her brother, could have healed her brother. And then she even seems to suggest, and I think this is where her faith is so interesting to watch, that Jesus might still do something amazing, even though he's dead. Martha also shows her belief that all will be resurrected in the last day. This is important. This is a pretty common Second Temple, first century Jewish belief that people will be resurrected in the last day. And Jesus qualifies that understanding by teaching her that he is the resurrection and the life. But through him will be eternal life. And he says this all throughout the New Testament. This is not the only example of this, but a very clear one here in this picture. Martha is an example, I think, of faith here. Well, she wasn't before in the last time that we saw her. She definitely is here, and her faith in Jesus causes her to go and do something, and it causes her to go and get Mary, her sister, who didn't come to greet Jesus and whose response is going to be a little bit different. So as we continue to read, I want you to notice this. Having said this, she went back and called her sister Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." As soon as Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw that Mary got up quickly and went out. They followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to cry there. As soon as Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and told him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." When Jesus saw her crying and the Jews who had come with her crying, he was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. "Where have you put him?" he asked. "Lord," they told him, "come and see." Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Couldn't he who opened the blind man's eyes," remember back to the passage we started out reading, "couldn't he who opened the blind man's eyes also have kept this man from dying?" Now we get to see Mary get involved, right? Martha did pretty good. I would say very much, of course, um, she has proclaimed something amazing. Um, but now Mary gets involved, and her reaction is interesting, to say the least. She runs to meet Jesus, and she cries out to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." Now, that's faithful in and of itself. She's realizing that, of course, Jesus could have healed him. But notice she doesn't add yet anything you ask of God, he will give it to you. And I want to note that Mary is reacting, I think, as many of us might. She's grieving the loss of her brother, um, which to her seems to be a settled thing, that he is dead. He's been dead for 4 days. And even Jesus, knowing what he will do next, weeps because of her distress and the death of this dear friend. I want to point out too, I'm going to make this larger so you guys can see it clearly. Jesus is not surprised that Lazarus has died, right? He's fully God and fully man. He knows this will happen. He's not surprised by the reactions of Mary and Martha. He knows how human beings function when they grieve. He's not going to be surprised when he raises Lazarus from the dead. That's the plan. He's going to point that out to us. But Jesus still feels the grief. He's fully human and fully God. He hates to see his loved ones die. He despises the sinfulness of the world we all live in far more than we do. He hates this sinfulness more than we hate it. And we're the ones who die because he created us. And Jesus decides to break the hold that death has over this one man here as a kind of a final miracle before the greatest miracle of all time, which is his death, burial, and resurrection. And in doing so, he's going to show what he will soon do for all his people. And this is where I think it really gets good. John 11:38 through 44. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. "Remove the stone," Jesus said. Please notice the parallels between this event and Jesus' resurrection. Jesus said, "Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, 'Lord, there's already a stench because he has been dead 4 days.' Jesus said to her, "Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd standing here, I said this, so that they may believe you sent me." After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linen strips and with his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unwrap him and let him go." This is unbelievable, but it is believable. Jesus has raised a man who is putrefacting, who is dead and being dissolved by his own stomach contents. This is unbelievable, but it happens, which is so often the case with Jesus. The seventh sign, this is, I've talked about this a little bit in the book of John. He uses 7 signs to kind of build up to the greatest miracle of all time, which is Jesus dying on the cross for us and being raised from the dead. And here, this is the last one. The raising of Lazarus is unbelievable, but it is believable. And I just think that's amazing. Jesus raises the dead man back to life. And notice how Jesus prays, right? Jesus prays so that the people around him hear him. And he says, "Thank you that you heard me." That's how he starts this prayer. And he goes on and he says that they may believe you sent me, right? Those aren't obviously next to each other. They're separated, but I'm pointing to that whole prayer that you guys can go back and read in your books. Like, what an amazing thing that is. He's saying, I know already, but they don't, and I care about them, and I want them to believe. And that's why he does this. And then the dead man is raised by a simple command: Lazarus, come out. And he does. The dead man is raised. He is unbound. What an amazing truth. Here we're getting to the summary point. It says this: the whole account of the death, burial, and resurrection of Lazarus by Jesus shows us that God the Son has power over life and death. His plan to bring glory and honor to himself is perfect and unchanging, and all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. Christ cares deeply for the hurts of his people. This miracle points to the greater miracle to come, where Christ himself will be killed, buried, and will be resurrected on the 3rd day. His resurrection will be far more important even than that of Lazarus. And that's what we have to look forward to as Christians. Here are a couple of questions for you guys to read and listen to. If you're in small groups or in Sunday school, read through these and make sure to get some answers for these. Read the following verses. Read verses 45 through 53. This is the tail end of this section. It's on page 136, I believe. Yeah, it's on page 136 of your books. And it's Jesus, the plot to kill Jesus in John chapter 11, verse 45 through 54. Read these verses and then answer the question: what is the reaction to Jesus' miracles by the Pharisees? Miracle by the Pharisees. Why? Second one is, why does Jesus let Lazarus die before coming to visit? The third one is, where is the village of Bethany? Why is its proximity to Jerusalem important for what comes next? And then finally, is our question we ask every single week: what is your favorite thing you learned this week from your reading? That's pages 117 through pages 136. So make sure you answer those questions, and I will see you guys back next week here on these live videos or in person. If you're joining our class, I'd love to see you guys back next week. Thank you guys so much for coming.